Hi, everyone. Lee Pacchia here, and you are watching Between the Lines, part of Fault Lines' look at the many cracks in America's criminal justice system. Special guest today, Fault Lines contributor and United States District Judge in Nebraska, the Honorable Richard Kopf joins us via Skype. Judge, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, we were originally set up to talk about your recent article on senior status judges, but we had some news break over the weekend, some sad news. United States Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away at the age of 79 in Marfa, Texas. This is a big news story. He was obviously a very important figure in American jurisprudence. Judge, what do you make of his passing? And I also have to note in your article that you wrote for us today, you had a really interesting quote that we'll get to in a moment. But first, your thoughts on the passing of Justice Scalia.
He was a legal giant. Apparently, everyone who dealt with him on the court and personally loved him as a person. And I think the politics surrounding his successor coming so soon after his death are grotesque. And I think I'll leave it at that.
In the piece that you wrote for us today, you point out that the United States Supreme Court is, in your opinion, the most dangerous branch of the United States federal government. What did you mean by that?
Well, what I meant by that is the political branches of our government are as polarized as our nation is polarized. And as a consequence of that, they don't do anything. They can't do anything, or at least they won't do anything. And as a consequence, they turn to the Supreme Court to resolve matters that should more properly be resolved in the political branches of government. And this firestorm of publicity following the death of Justice Scalia is an example of how the Supreme Court has become dangerous. We are, and I don't mean that as a criticism of the court necessarily, but when the nation is unable, the political branches of the nation, of our nation, are unable to function in a civil manner and resolve disputes that are easily resolvable by reasonable people, but they'd rather use litigation as kind of a blood sport, and it ends up in the Supreme Court. It's no surprise that just adds to the polarization that we see, and that, in my opinion, is such a sad and awful state that we see virtually every day. And so the court has been thrust into the political realm. It bears some responsibility, of course, but largely the people and the political branches of government, by acting unreasonably, have forced the court to have this, I think, dangerous power to resolve policy disputes that ought not, in a democracy and a republic, ought more properly be resolved in another forum.
Judge, I have to ask, who would you like to see replace Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court?
Well, there's someone on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit who I think would be great. Her name is Judge Jane Kelly, honors graduate of Duke, honors graduate of Harvard, federal public defender for many years in Iowa, a law clerk to a federal district judge, a law clerk to a Court of Appeals judge. She was also a Fulbright fellow. People who I regard very highly on the court just rave about her. And she has a very unique personal story in that in 2004, she was viciously assaulted while jogging and horribly beaten, almost to death. And yet she continued to serve as a federal public defender. In a perfect world, I'd love to see Judge Kelly on the court. If I were her friend, I don't know that I would tell her to accept such a nomination at this time, because I think the raw political situation is going to tear the nominee apart. But she would certainly be one that I would think would bring to the court a true diversity, a criminal defense practitioner with a great deal of courage, great experience, great education, and who by all measures is a moderate person, both judicially and otherwise.
Judge, just reading into your remarks, it's interesting. You point out that the nomination process is hellish in today's day and age, and I think that's absolutely right. But I'm also getting the sense that the nature of the job itself, when you make it past a nomination process and actually get a seat on the court, it ain't what it used to be. Or am I reading too much into that?
No, I don't think you are. I think that the job has grown as the court has grown in, if you want to say, influence or power. And that calls upon a nominee and a justice to have great judgment. In my opinion, the greatest power the court has is to decide what cases it's not going to decide. And that requires great judgment, great wisdom. As long as we suffer the dysfunction that we suffer now, the court inevitably is going to be confronted with these myriad of hot button issues that it's going to be in a no-win situation. And the court respectfully needs to tread carefully about how far it's willing to go to resolve those sorts of disputes.
Interesting stuff. I certainly learned something new today. Judge Richard Kopf, thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you.
That's Judge Richard Kopf from Nebraska. If you'd like to see more of the stuff we're working on, be sure to go check us out online. You can find us at mimesislaw.com under the Fault Lines tab. If you want to check out one of the articles that we mentioned from Judge Kopf, you can find a link in the description of this video. If you're listening to us on a podcast, be sure to go to iTunes and write us a good review. It makes all the difference in the world. If you're watching over YouTube, please subscribe to this channel. There's more good stuff coming, I promise. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching. See you next week. What does the union do when it appears on location of an officer-involved killing?
Well, so pretty much what they did is they had a veteran police officer who I think had spent a long time working in the Chicago PD's press office. When he left the police department, he got hired on with the union, and basically he was sort of their